Welcome to Bookish Mind, Season 2. In this deep dive, we journey through Chapter 13 of Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, titled The Brain, a broadcasting and receiving station for thought. Hill challenges us to see our minds as energy centers, sending out desires and receiving insights from infinite intelligence and others in ways science is only beginning to understand.
Yeah, this chapter, it's really something else. It pushes way beyond how we normally think about the brain.
It really does. Feels almost sci-fi, even though it's nearly 100 years old now.
That's right. Hill isn't just talking about, biology inside your skull. He's proposing this really, radical idea for his time.
Which is?
That your thoughts, especially when they're charged up with emotion, with real purpose, they aren't just passive things happening inside you.
Okay.
He's claiming they're active forces. They have this energetic interaction with reality.
An interaction that goes beyond just influencing yourself.
Exactly. It affects your own subconscious, sure, but he suggests it potentially connects you to, a bigger intelligence field, or maybe even other people's minds.
Right. So our mission here really is to unpack how he claims this works.
Yeah.
What are the bits and pieces, the mechanics of this mental radio station?
Yeah, and what kind of proof or, early scientific hints does he actually point to?
Okay, let's dive in. Starting with that core idea, the big analogy, the brain as a literal radio, broadcasting and receiving thoughts.
He brings this up right away. And he connects it to some pretty big names he worked with, apparently decades before he wrote the book.
Like who?
Dr. Alexander Graham Bell, inventor of the telephone, and Dr. Elmer R. Gates, who is known for work on mind-body stuff, psychology.
Interesting connections.
Yeah, and Hill says it was through hanging out with them, associating with them, that he sort of observed this principle. Every human brain, he says flat out, is both a broadcasting station sending out thought vibrations.
And a receiving station picking them up.
Exactly. It's like he grabbed the hottest tech of his day, radio, and said, hey, maybe our minds work something like this.
So just like radio waves needed that invisible ether they talked about back then.
Right. He's saying thought vibrations travel through something similar between brains. It's a picture where your thoughts aren't just stuck inside you. They might be going out, and you might be tuning into others.
Okay, but does he get more specific? Like which part of the brain does what?
He does. He points first to the creative imagination. We've talked about that before from earlier chapters.
Right.
He says that is the receiving set of the brain. That's the part that can pick up those thought vibrations coming from other brains.
So it's like the antenna.
Yeah, kind of. But it's also, he says, the communication channel between your conscious mind, your reasoning bit, and, he calls them 4 sources of thought stimuli.
4 sources.
Yeah.
He doesn't say what they are here.
Not in this chapter, no. But it hints there are different places these ideas or insights might come from that the creative imagination tunes into. So yeah, think of it as your antenna and your tuner, always scanning.
Okay, so the creative imagination is that connection point, translating vibrations into thoughts we can understand.
That seems to be the idea. But like any radio, you need to turn it on and tune it properly. Just having the equipment isn't enough.
Meaning,
Hill says, the mind has to be stimulated. Its vibration rate needs to be stepped up to a really high frequency to actually receive those thoughts effectively.
the stepping up. Okay, how does it happen? What steps it up?
Emotion. This is where feelings come in a really almost mechanical way in this model.
Positive emotions, negative ones.
Both. He says both positive and negative emotions act like accelerators. They increase the vibration rate of your thoughts.
Interesting. So it's not just what you think, but how strongly you feel about it?
Precisely. He draws a line between just plain, ordinary thinking and thought that's really charged up with feeling. He suggests only the really high vibration thoughts are strong enough to get carried by this ether between brains.
So basic thought is like energy, vibrating fast already.
But thought that gets modified, boosted, stepped up by strong emotions, that vibrates much faster.
And that's the kind of thought that can travel between minds, using this broadcasting system he's describing.
That's the argument. So it's the energy, the feeling in the thought that gives it the range, the power to be received.
Like the difference between whispering and shouting. Add emotion, and the thought carries further.
That's a good way to put it. The emotion is like the wattage. It gives the signal its strength.
Got it. Which leads us right into the next bit, where he talks about which emotions are the most powerful boosters, and he focuses on one in particular.
Yes, the emotion of sex. He singles that one out. Says it has the greatest intensity, the most driving force of all human emotions.
He's pretty direct about it.
Very. He states that a brain stimulated by the emotion of sex vibrates much, much faster than when that emotion isn't active.
Now, is he talking about, the physical act?
Not necessarily. It's more about recognizing the immense energy associated with that fundamental drive, that creative force, and potentially harnessing it.
Which connects back to that idea of sex transmutation from earlier in the book, correct?
Exactly. Builds right on it. The idea there was about channeling that powerful energy, not just letting it be about physical urges, but redirecting it.
Into what? Creative work? Goals?
Yeah, creative stuff, intellectual work, chasing down your big goals. And the result of doing that, he argues here, is precisely this. It jacks up your thought vibration rate.
To a level where the creative imagination, the receiver, becomes super receptive.
Highly receptive, yeah, like turning up the volume way high on your mental radio. You become much more sensitive to picking things up from the ether.
Okay, so transmutation makes you a better receiver. But you said it does something else too, for your own thoughts.
Right. Vibrating at that high rate doesn't just help you receive. It gives your own thoughts that crucial feeling, that emotional intensity that your subconscious mind needs to grab onto them and act.
Ah, so this is where the broadcasting part comes in, within your own system.
Exactly. He identifies the subconscious mind as the sending station. That's where the thought vibrations get broadcast from.
Broadcast outwards. To other minds or...
He implies both, I think. Outwards into the ether, potentially reaching others, or maybe infinite intelligence, and inwards impressing themselves deeply onto your own subconscious, which then works to make them real.
So that supercharged thought, whether it's from transmuted sex energy or other big emotions like faith or love, that's what the subconscious effectively sends out.
That's the link he makes. The same emotional power makes the creative imagination a better receiver, and the subconscious a stronger transmitter. It works both ways.
Okay, so let's quickly recap the 3 key parts he says you need for this whole mental broadcasting thing to work.
Right. You've got 1, the subconscious mind. That's your sending station. 2, the creative imagination. That's your receiving set.
Got it.
And 3, autosuggestion. That's the tool, the method you use to actually switch the whole thing on to get it working.
And it all starts, he says, with desire.
Yep. That burning desire, properly formulated, pushed into the subconscious, using autosuggestion, that's the spark. That's what gets those 3 principles, subconscious, creative imagination, autosuggestion, working together. Just like he described back in the chapter on turning desire into money. It's a whole system.
It really is a system where you, the individual, have a role in flipping the switches, directing these mental powers. Which kind of leads naturally into his next big idea, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About us relying too much on just our physical senses.
Yeah, the age is intangible section. He really makes a case here that we've been stuck, historically.
Stuck how?
Stuck depending only on what we can see, touch, weigh, measure, our physical senses. He says our knowledge has been mostly limited to physical stuff.
But we're moving beyond that.
He believed we were entering the most marvelous of all ages, an age where we'd start learning about the intangible forces all around us. Powerful forces we can't see.
He even suggests that our non-physical side, the other self, might be stronger than our physical body.
He does. It's about shifting our focus, realizing we're surrounded by and often controlled by things we can't perceive directly.
And he gives examples to hammer this home, right? Things we can't control or fully grasp.
Oh yeah, vivid ones. Like the massive power in ocean waves, totally intangible force, and we can't really cope with it. Or gravity.
We rely on gravity, but do we understand it?
Not really, he points out. We don't know what it is, fundamentally, but this invisible force holds planets in place and keeps us grounded. Thunderstorms were helpless. Electricity.
Another one we use constantly but don't fully get.
Right. He says we don't know what it truly is, where it comes from, its ultimate purpose, yet we depend on it completely, even the force in the soil.
The intelligence that turns dirt into food and resources.
Exactly. Another invisible, intangible power we don't understand, yet it sustains us, provides wealth. He lines up all these examples: gravity, oceans, storms, electricity, life force in the earth, all unseen, all powerful.
To make the point that just because something is intangible doesn't mean it's not real or incredibly influential.
Precisely. And then he brings thought into that list.
As the greatest intangible of all.
Yes. He says, look, despite all our education and culture, we know next to nothing about the force of thought itself. We study the physical brain, sure, the wiring, the chemistry.
But the actual power of thought as a force, Still a mystery.
Largely, yes. So he's asking, why do we accept gravity's unseen power but doubt thought's potential intangible power?
He's really setting the stage. Look around, the world runs on unseen forces. Why should thought be different? Which transitions perfectly into the next section, where he brings in some actual brain science.
Right. Not to debunk his intangible ideas, but almost to support them. To suggest the physical brain itself hints at something more.
Even though he admits science was only in the kindergarten stage back then.
Yeah, he acknowledges the limits. But even then, the sheer scale, the complexity they were starting to see was, well, he calls it astonishing. He brings in work from Dr. C. Judson Herrick at the University of Chicago,
A neuroscientist.
a prominent one, and Hill uses Herrick's findings to throw out some numbers about the brain that are just staggering.
Like the number of nerve cells.
In the cerebral cortex, the thinking part, Herrick estimated somewhere between 10 billion and 14 billion nerve cells. Billion.
Okay, that's a lot.
And crucially, Herrick noted they aren't just thrown together randomly. They're arranged in definite, orderly patterns. It's a highly structured system.
But there was an even bigger number, wasn't there? About the connections.
Oh, yeah. This is the one that's almost impossible to wrap your head around. The number of connections, the lines linking those billions of cells together.
What was the figure?
Hill quotes Herrick saying it's 1 followed by 15 million ciphers.
15 million zeros.
Yeah. I mean, think about that. A billion is 9 zeros. A trillion is 12. This is exponentially larger. Hill quotes Herrick again, saying this number is so huge that astronomical figures dealing with hundreds of millions of light years become insignificant by comparison.
Wow. So the potential connections inside your own head make cosmic distances look small.
That's the comparison Herrick apparently made. It speaks to an almost infinite complexity right there in the physical brain.
And scientists were already developing tools to study this, microelectrodes. And...
Yeah, methods to measure the tiny electrical signals, the communication happening between these cells. Very sophisticated stuff for the 1930s.
So what's Hill's takeaway from all this physical complexity? Why bring it up?
His big question is this. Is it really plausible that this unbelievably intricate machinery exists just for basic biological functions, just for keeping the body running?
He's suggesting it seems overbuilt for that.
Exactly. He asks, isn't it likely that this same system, capable of such complex communication between its own cells, might also be the way we communicate with other intangible forces?
So he's using the brain's physical complexity as evidence for its potential to handle non-physical communication. The hardware looks capable of more.
That's the implication. It looks like it's designed for something bigger than just biology. And right after hitting us with these mind-bending numbers, he introduces research that he felt was heading in a similar direction.
Okay, which brings us to Section 5 and Duke University.
Yep. Dr. J.B. Rhine and his team. Hill mentions this research was hitting the news, like in the New York Times, just as his book was going to press. He saw it as timely confirmation.
And Rhine was studying ESP telepathy.
Pretty much. Trying to apply scientific methods to things like telepathy, mind-to-mind communication without senses and clairvoyance, knowing about hidden objects or distant events.
This is pretty groundbreaking academic work back then, right?
Oh, definitely. Taking these phenomena seriously in a university lab setting. Hill says Ryan ran over 100,000 tests.
And the results. What did Hill highlight?
The really remarkable findings. In tests where people tried to name hidden cards like those Zener cards with symbols, some participants consistently scored way, way above chance.
How far above chance?
Hill quotes a summary saying the odds of getting scores that high by luck were not one chance in many a million, just incredibly improbable.
Statistics like that would definitely make people pay attention.
It did. As Hill notes, it led some scientists involved to think the existence of telepathy and clairvoyance seemed enormously probable based purely on the statistical outcomes. Maybe not definitive proof for everyone, but very hard to just ignore.
Did Ryan's work offer any clues about how this ESP might work?
Yes.
Things Hill could connect to his own ideas.
Yes. Several interesting points came out of the analysis, summarized by E.H. Wright, whom Hill quotes. First, it didn't seem to involve the known senses. No eye, no ear.
Okay.
And really critically, distance didn't seem to matter. People scored just as well whether they were in the next room or hundreds of miles away.
That's weird. Doesn't that argue against it being like a physical signal, like radio waves? Because those get weaker with distance.
Exactly, Wright's point, and why Hill likely seized on it. Physical signals follow the inverse square law. They fade out fast. Since ESP apparently didn't, it suggested it might operate on a completely different principle, maybe one not limited by physical space, like Hill's ether idea, perhaps.
But it wasn't totally disconnected from the person's state, right? It wasn't magic.
No, and this is important. Ryan found it did vary with the person's mental and physical state. Performance was better when people were wide awake, alert, focused.
Not when they were sleepy or in a trance.
Right. Contrary to some popular ideas, alertness helped. And things like narcotics hurt the scores, while stimulants seemed to boost them.
And the person had to actually try.
Yes, effort was key. They had to be actively trying to succeed. It wasn't passive reception. It required focus and intention.
So it behaved like other mental abilities, in some ways needing focus, effort, alertness, but used a non-sensory channel.
That seems to be the picture. And based on all this, Wright drew another conclusion that Hill clearly liked.
Which was?
That telepathy, getting thoughts from others, and clairvoyance, getting info about object sevens, were probably just two sides of the same coin, the same underlying ability.
Why do you think that?
Because they usually showed up together in people who had either ability, they were usually about equally strong in that person, and neither was blocked by walls or distance. It suggested one core faculty. Wright even speculated maybe things like prophetic dreams or premonitions could be part of it too.
Wow. So maybe one fundamental way our minds connect to information beyond the senses.
That's the implication. And Hill jumps on these findings, especially the need for alertness and focus, to support his own ideas about activating the sixth sense, which he gets into in the next chapter. He sees Ryan's work as independent scientific backup.
Okay, so seeing this potential scientific validation naturally leads him to talk about how he applies these ideas, right? The Mastermind Conference.
Exactly. Section 6 is all about practical application. He says, based on his own experiences plus insights like Ryan's, he figured out the ideal conditions for stimulating the mind to access that sixth sense, the sort of intuitive knowing.
And what are those conditions?
For him, it involved a close working group, himself and 2 staff members.
A small team.
Yeah. The goal was to stimulate their minds together, applying a principle like his invisible counselor's idea. They try to blend their 3 minds into, like, one collective mind.
To do what?
To solve real-world problems for their clients, complex personal issues.
And how do they actually do that? What's the process?
It sounds incredibly simple. They sit at a table, state the problem clearly, and then just start talking about it harmoniously. Everyone throws in thoughts, ideas, whatever comes up.
Just brainstorming together, basically.
Sort of, but he emphasizes the harmony and focus. And then he describes the strange thing that happens, that this process somehow puts each of them in touch with unknown sources of knowledge. Ideas and solutions pop up that are definitely outside what any of them knew individually beforehand.
So it's more than just combining their existing knowledge. New stuff emerges.
That's what he claims, as if the combined mental energy taps into something larger, some wider information field.
And he connects this directly to the mastermind principle.
Explicitly. He calls this roundtable method a practical application of the mastermind, 2 or more minds working in perfect harmony for a definite purpose. He says this focused, harmonious chat between 3 people is the simplest, most practical way he knows to use the mastermind.
So he's giving a concrete technique. This is how you can try to access that higher knowledge, that collective intelligence.
Right. And he ties a huge potential reward to it. He says if you, the student, adopt a similar plan, you can come into possession of the famous Carnegie formula.
The secret Andrew Carnegie gave him.
The very one. By linking this specific mastermind practice to getting that ultimate secret, he's basically saying this is how it works. This collaborative, harmonious, focused thinking that taps into higher insights. That's the key mechanism. He even tells you to mark the page and reread the intro about Carnegie later. It's that important.
It really drives home that his idea of riches is way more than just money or strategy. It's about mastering these mental, emotional, and maybe even collective or intuitive faculties.
Absolutely. The mastermind practice is the bridge to those intangible resources he keeps talking about.
Now, there's one more short bit in this chapter, section 7, where he mentions the Great Depression. It seems a bit random at first.
Yeah, it does feel tucked in. He calls the Depression a blessing in disguise.
That's a strong statement. How does he justify that?
He says it reduced the whole world to a new starting point, giving everyone a fresh opportunity. It connects, I think, to his theme that when the old physical structures, economic, social breakdown, you're forced to rely on inner resources.
On intangible things, like ingenuity, determination. Maybe intuition?
Exactly. Crisis forces you to look inward, to innovate, to use those very intangible forces he's been discussing. It's that mind over circumstance idea again. Profound disruption can unlock potential you didn't know was there.
It's a challenging perspective on a really tough time, but it fits his overall philosophy. Okay, so let's try to quickly pull the main threads together from this really packed chapter.
Okay, so brain as a radio sender and receiver, powered by emotion, especially transmuted energy, which boosts the thought vibration.
Subconscious sends, creative imagination receives, autosuggestion activates it, and desire kicks it all off.
Right. Thought is the biggest intangible force, more powerful than we realize because we're stuck on physical senses.
Then the brain's insane complexity hints it's built from more than just biology.
And early EST research, like Ryan's at Duke, suggested minds can connect non-physically, especially with focus and alertness, which Hill saw as backup.
Finally, the Mastermind Conference Harmonious Group Focus is the practical way to use this, tap into higher knowledge, and even get that Carnegie secret.
Pretty much sums it up. It's a chapter that fundamentally asks you to rethink the nature of your mind and its place in the universe. Is it just contained, or is it actively interacting?
It really shifts the frame from just what am I thinking to what energy am I putting out and what am I tuning into.
Exactly. Which leads to a really provocative thought for you listening right now.
Okay, let's hear it.
Given everything Hill claims here, the broadcasting brain, the power of focused emotion, the hints from early ESP studies, the sheer complexity of your own brain, how could you start to just notice in your own life if maybe, just maybe, your thoughts are having some kind of influence or connection beyond the obvious?
You mean look for clues?
Yeah. What conditions, thinking about Hill's ideas, like when you have really strong feelings, positive or negative, tied to a clear goal? Or moments of sudden insight that seem to come from nowhere, or even when you're deeply connected in conversation with others about something important.
Could those be moments where this broadcasting receiving is more detectable? Have you ever had an idea feel like it wasn't yours or felt oddly connected to someone far away?
It's really just an invitation, isn't it, to pay closer attention to your own mental landscape, your intuitions, your interactions, and just see if anything resonates with these possibilities Hill raises. Not necessarily proving anything, but exploring.
A personal exploration of the ideas, and this chapter definitely sets up the next one on the sixth sense. You feel like you need this foundation to understand that.
It provides the how, the potential mechanism for that intuitive faculty, yeah.
Well, this has been incredibly thought-provoking, a real deep dive into a challenging chapter. Thanks for unpacking it all.
My pleasure. Hill certainly doesn't shy away from big ideas.
He really doesn't. Until next time.